My brother didn't just lie about me, he forged my name, stole 4 years of my future, and stood in our kitchen eating cereal while I found out. I was 17 when I got the letter from Hargrove University. Full academic scholarship, 4 years, all expenses covered, renewable as long as I kept my GPA above 3.5. I had worked for that letter since middle school, tutoring other kids for free just to stay sharp, taking AP classes at 6 in the morning, spending my junior year summer doing a research internship at the county hospital for $12 a day. When the envelope came, I sat on the porch steps for a long time before I opened it. I think some part of me was afraid it would say no. It said yes. My father cried, actual tears, standing at the kitchen counter, wiping his face with a dish towel. He kept saying, "That's my girl. That's my girl." My mother hugged me so hard my back cracked. My brother, who was 19 and had dropped out of community college the previous spring, shook my hand. He said, "Good for you." His grip was loose. He wasn't looking at me. I remember thinking he seemed distracted, maybe a little embarrassed by our father's tears. I didn't think anything else of it. That was my first mistake. I want to be honest about my brother because I spent a long time making excuses for him. He wasn't a bad kid growing up, or at least I didn't think so. He was funny. He could do impressions of every teacher we'd ever had. He used to sneak me the last of the ice cream and pretend the carton was already empty when our parents asked. I loved him the way you love someone you've shared a bathroom with for 16 years, with complete familiarity and almost no real understanding of who they actually are. What I didn't fully understand was how much he resented me. He had always been the one our parents bragged about when I was younger. He was the athlete, the one with the easy charm, the one coaches called on weekends. Then he blew out his knee sophomore year and the scholarship offers stopped coming and something shifted in him. Something I was too young to see clearly at the time. By the time I was getting straight A's and he was failing out of Riverside Community College, I think I had become everything he was supposed to be and wasn't. I think seeing my acceptance letter made something in him go very cold. The scholarship required me to submit a formal acceptance form by March 15. The financial aid office at Hargrove would then contact our household to set up the disbursement paperwork. My father was supposed to co-sign a single document related to tax information. That was it. Simple. Except the letter never came, or rather it came, and I never saw it. I found out what happened in the worst possible way. Not from my brother. Not even from the school. I found out because I called the financial aid office in late April to ask about orientation dates, and the woman on the phone got very quiet and said, "Ms. Mees, already your scholarship was formally declined on March 22nd. I said, "I'm sorry, what?" She said, "We received a signed declination form." We did attempt to follow up with a phone call, but when we didn't hear back, the award was reallocated. I stood in the hallway of our house holding my phone so tightly my hand went white. I asked her to describe the form. She described my name in my brother's handwriting. I know his handwriting. He writes his A's like little flags. I've seen it on birthday cards and grocery lists my whole life. I didn't say anything for a moment. Then I said, "Is the scholarship gone entirely?" She said, "I'm so sorry. The funds have been awarded to another student." I sat down on the floor of the hallway. I didn't cry. I just sat there trying to understand what had happened, the same way you try to understand something in a foreign language. Like the words are technically familiar, but the meaning keeps sliding away from you. I went to my brother's room. He wasn't home. I went through the desk in the corner, the one he'd had since we were kids, the one with the broken bottom drawer that never shut all the way, and in the third drawer I found a bank statement, not his regular account. A new one. The statement showed a direct deposit from a private number I didn't recognize, dated 3 days after my scholarship deadline passed. $12,000. I sat on the edge of his bed and looked at that number for a long time. Later, I found out what he had done. There was a private scholarship through a foundation connected to my father's employer. My brother had known about it because he used to help my father sort the mail. It was a one-time award, $15,000, given annually to the dependent of an employee who demonstrated academic achievement. My brother had pulled the application materials filled them out using my academic records, my GPA, my AP scores, my hospital internship, and submitted the application in his name with a forged letter of recommendation. He had also apparently redirected the follow-up communications from Hargrove to a secondary email address he had created. He had signed my declination form so I wouldn't get the scholarship and then collected the foundation money himself. He had used my entire academic record to steal money that should have been mine. And then he had watched me wait all spring for orientation information that was never going to come. What I keep coming back to is the cereal. The morning I found the bank statement, he came home around noon and poured himself a bowl of cereal and stood at the counter eating it. He asked me if we were out of orange juice. I said I didn't know. He checked the fridge. He poured himself a glass of water instead. He didn't look nervous. He didn't look guilty. He looked like a person who had done nothing wrong, eating cereal on a Tuesday, and I was sitting at the kitchen table holding a bank statement that explained exactly who he was. I didn't say anything that day. I had learned watching my parents' marriage that the person who reacts loudest rarely wins. My mother had a saying, "Slow water cuts deep stone." She said it about everything from cooking to arguments. I thought about that saying while my brother rinsed his bowl. I needed my father to know. But I also needed to be certain, because I knew what would happen if I accused my brother without proof I could hold in both hands. My father would have wanted to believe me, but he would have hesitated. My brother would have denied it. My mother would have gotten stuck in the middle trying to keep the peace. I had seen that pattern play out before on smaller things, and I was not going to let it happen with this. I spent 3 days gathering everything. I printed the bank statement. I went to the financial aid office in person and asked for a copy of the declination form with the signature. I called the private foundation and asked about the scholarship timeline and the name of the recipient. And the woman I spoke to confirmed after some back and forth that the award had gone to my brother. I asked her to email me that confirmation in writing. She was quiet for a moment and then said she would look into the matter and get back to me. I gave her my personal email address, not the family one. I also found the email account he had created. It took me a while, but I knew my brother. I knew his patterns, the passwords he defaulted to, the usernames he liked. The account had 16 emails in it, all from Hargrove's financial aid office, including 3 that asked for a call back to confirm the declination was intentional. He had read every single one and done nothing. When I had everything printed and organized in a manila folder, I called my father at work and asked if he could come home a little early. I told him I had something important to show him and that I needed him to look at it without my brother present. My father could hear something in my voice. He said he'd be home by 4. He was home by 3:30. I laid everything out on the kitchen table. The declination form, the bank statement, the printed email chain from the account my brother had created, the confirmation from the foundation that the scholarship had been awarded to someone using my academic credentials. My father read through every page slowly, the way he reads everything, moving his lips slightly, going back to reread things that don't make immediate sense. I watched his face. He read the foundation confirmation twice. He looked up at me. He looked back down at the paper. He said, "How long have you known?" I said, 4 days. He put the papers down very carefully, the way you put something down when you're afraid of what you'll do with your hands if they're not occupied. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I need to make some phone calls." He called his HR department first, then the foundation directly, then a lawyer he had used years ago for a real estate matter. I sat at the table while he paced the living room, and I heard him explain, in a voice that got very flat and very quiet, the way his voice always does when he is truly angry, what had happened. I heard him say the words forgery and fraud in his own daughter, and I need to understand what my options are. My brother came home at 6. He walked through the front door and saw my father standing in the living room and the papers still on the kitchen table, and I watched him understand what had happened in real time. It was like watching a building go offline floor by floor. His face went through 5 different expressions in about 2 seconds. He tried to say something. I don't remember what. My father held up one hand. My father said, "Don't." That was the only thing he said to my brother for the next 3 hours. He made him sit in the living room while he finished his calls. My mother came home at 6:30 and my father explained everything to her in their bedroom with the door closed. I heard her make a sound that wasn't quite crying and wasn't quite yelling. Something in between. The HR department confirmed that the scholarship application had been submitted under my brother's name using records that matched my profile. The foundation froze the disbursement pending an investigation. My brother had only received the first installment of 12,000. The remaining 3,000 was held. HR flagged the matter to their legal team. The lawyer my father spoke to confirmed that what my brother had done constituted fraud, forgery, and identity theft under state law, and that my father had grounds to pursue it both civilly and through law enforcement. My father looked at my brother for a long time after getting off the phone with the lawyer. He said, "You used your sister's entire academic life to steal from her. You signed her name. You created a fake email account. You watched her wait all spring, and you stood in this kitchen eating breakfast like you'd done nothing." My brother said he was going to pay it back. My father said, "That's not the question right now." What happened next took several months to fully resolve, and I'll try to be straightforward about it because people always want to know the details, and I think the details matter. The foundation pursued the fraud claim internally and referred the matter to the state attorney's office. My brother was eventually charged with forgery and identity fraud. He took a plea deal. He did not go to prison. He received 3 years probation, mandatory financial restitution, and 200 hours of community service. The full $15,000 was ordered to be repaid, and the case created a formal record that has followed him since. Hargrove University's financial aid office, when my father contacted them and explained what had happened and provided the documentation, agreed to review my situation. They no longer had the original scholarship funds available. Those had genuinely been reallocated, but they connected me with their emergency academic re-entry program, and combined with an outside appeal I filed with the foundation's parent organization, I received a partial reinstatement of support that covered most of my first year. The rest I covered through a combination of a separate merit grant, a work-study position in the biology department, and a private loan that I finished paying off last year. I started at Hargrove the following January, a semester late. I kept my GPA above 3.5 every semester. I graduated with honors. I am now in my second year of a physician assistant program at a state university 2 hours from the house where I grew up. I don't talk to my brother. I want to be honest about that too, because people always ask. My mother still has a relationship with him. She calls him on his birthday. She spent a long time trying to get me to move toward forgiveness, which is a phrase I've thought about a lot. I understand what she means by it, and I understand why she needs it to be true that her family can be repaired. I'm not angry at her for trying, but I've had to be honest with her about something. Forgiveness, in my understanding of it, doesn't require me to pretend that what he did was something other than what it was. He didn't make a mistake. He made a plan. He executed it over weeks. He watched me wait. Those are choices, and they belong to him, and what I choose to do with the space between us also belongs to me. My father drove me to Hargrove the January I finally started. We loaded my things into a car and drove 3 hours through grey winter light, and we didn't talk much. But somewhere past the second hour, he reached over and put his hand on top of mine, where it was resting on the center console, and he said, "I'm sorry it took me this long to understand what was in front of me." I didn't know exactly what he meant. Maybe he meant my brother. Maybe he meant all the years I had been working so hard with so little room to stumble. Maybe he meant something he'd been carrying for longer than this particular thing. I said, "You're here now." He nodded. He kept his eyes on the road. We got to campus at noon. The sky had cleared by then. He helped me carry boxes up 3 flights of stairs, and when we were done, he stood in the doorway of my room looking at the bare walls and the small window with the view of the quad, and he said, "You earned this." I know I did. That's the thing he didn't understand he was giving me. Not just the affirmation, but the reminder. Because my brother had tried to make me feel like what I'd worked for was something that could be taken, redirected, handed to someone more convenient. And standing in that doorway with my father, I understood clearly for the first time that the one thing he hadn't been able to forge was the work itself. The years of it. The 5 a.m. alarm clocks and the hospital internship and the AP exams and the research papers written on weekends. He could sign my name. He could redirect my mail. He could sit at a counter eating cereal while my future dissolved. But he couldn't take what I had actually built. And in the end, neither could anything else. I think about the cereal a lot. Not the fraud, not the courtroom, not the probation hearing, the cereal. The way he stood at that counter completely unbothered and asked me if we were out of orange juice. That image has stayed with me longer than any of the harder ones, because it told me something true about how people who do harmful things actually live with themselves. They don't pace at night replaying it. They pour themselves a glass of water and move on. And for a long time, I thought that meant something was wrong with me for caring so much about something he'd already filed away. What I've come to understand is that the caring was never the weakness. It was the whole point. My brother made a calculated choice. He didn't steal from me in a moment of desperation or panic. He built a plan over weeks, executed it in stages, and maintained it through months of silence. That takes a particular kind of intelligence applied in a direction that has no flow. Because when you use your mind to take from someone instead of build something, you don't actually gain anything that holds. He had $15,000 for a few months. He has a fraud conviction for the rest of his life. The math on that is not complicated. But you can only see it clearly if you're willing to be honest about cause and effect, about the facts that what we do follows us, not because the universe is keeping score in some mystical sense, but because actions leave marks in the real world. On records, on relationships, on the people who were in the room. What saved me wasn't luck. I want to be clear about that. My father showing up wasn't luck. I called him and told him to come home early because I had spent 3 days organizing every piece of documentation I could find before I said a single word out loud. That was a choice I made deliberately, because I had learned somewhere along the way that righteous anger without evidence is just noise. You have to be right, and you have to be able to prove it, and those are two separate tasks that both require real work. I think about the version of me who might have stormed into my brother's room the day I found the bank statement and accused him without the folder of printed emails and foundation confirmations. He would have denied it. My parents would have been torn. Nothing would have been resolved. The scholarship would still have been gone, and I would have had nothing but my own word, which, when someone is determined not to believe you, is sometimes not enough on its own. So I waited. I documented. I was meticulous in a moment when I wanted to scream, because I understood that how I handled the next 72 hours would determine everything that came after. That is not a natural instinct at 17, or at whatever age I was when I finally processed what it had cost me. It is something you build deliberately, out of the understanding that your integrity and your patience are the only things no one can forge. I graduated. I'm in my second year of a PA program now. My brother is on probation. None of that happened by accident. It happened because choices compounded. His in one direction, mine in another, and eventually the distance between those directions became impossible to ignore. The thing I'd want anyone to take from this is simple, even if living it isn't. Do the work honestly. Document what matters, and when someone tries to take what you've built, let the truth speak in your voice and not your volume. It took longer than it should have. It cost more than it should have. It cost more than it should have. But I got there, and I got there as myself, and that turned out to be the part that couldn't be stolen.